I think it is clear to believe in the power of ideas.
Fresh thinking to the Manhattan Institute.
Good afternoon. I'm Howard Husick, Vice President for Policy Research at the Manhattan Institute. It's my pleasure to welcome you to our program, the awarding of the 2012 Manhattan Institute Urban Innovator Award to New York City's Human Resource Administrator, Robert Doar. A few words before Bob Doar is introduced by Peter Cove about the prize itself. This nonpartisan prize is awarded annually under the auspices of the Institute's Center for State and Local Leadership to a state or local official whose work is in keeping with and advances the Institute's belief that a combination of effective government and personal responsibility are the keys to the prosperity of our cities, and that cities, in turn, are the engines of the U.S. economy and the vehicles for upward mobility for their residents. The award in the past has gone to Indiana Governor Mitch Daniels for his use of private financing to improve public infrastructure, to Washington, D.C. School Chancellor Michelle Rhee for her work leading to improvements in educational achievement in that city, to the Executive Director of the Atlanta Public Housing Authority, Renee Glover, for quadrupling employment among the system's tenants, to Republican Governor of Florida, Jeb Bush, for his initiatives ranging from disaster preparedness to the use of vouchers for special education services. Just last year, the award was presented to Democratic Rhode Island State Treasurer Gina Raimondo for her path-breaking work to put that state's public employee pension system on a sound financial footing. The Urban Innovator Award is not meant to reward those whose approach fits some preconceived notion of ours. Rather, we look for what works and then try to spread that good news around. We're proud today to recognize someone from our own city whose work we believe has national implications for the ongoing challenge to provide a cost-effective social safety net while at the same time discouraging dependency. To introduce Commissioner Doar, it's my privilege to call upon Peter Cove, the founder of America Works Incorporated, the nation's premier private performance-based workforce development firm that has placed hard-to-serve individuals in employment since 1984. To date, America Works, under the guidance of both Peter and its Chief Executive Officer, Dr. Lee Bowes, who's also with us today, has placed more than 300,000 such individuals in jobs in cities across the United States. That includes Newark, New Jersey, where America Works and the Manhattan Institute have worked together on the Newark Prisoner Reentry Initiative. Peter is also the founder of the Work First Foundation, established in 2005 to raise awareness of the effectiveness of work-based models of programs to assist the disadvantaged, the successful model of which inspired the Newark program on which we're working together. Ladies and gentlemen, to introduce our 2012 Urban Innovator, Robert Doar, please join me in welcoming the founder of America Works, Peter Cove.
Thank you, everyone. I could think of no better recipient for the Manhattan Institute's Urban Innovator Award than Robert Doar. Having begun work in New York City in the war and poverty in 1965, I have known at least 14 Human Resource Administration commissioners, including Mitchell Mike Sviridoff, the first creator of the department under Mayor Lindsay. This was a massive effort, combining many social service agencies into one super administration. The expenditures for HRA now exceed that of 135 countries in the world. No commissioner I have known could have accomplished what Robert has. Robert creatively built on the key reforms initiated by the previous administration, and Jason Turner, who was here, was the commissioner under Mayor Giuliani that initiated those changes. So we want to applaud you as well. Robert has continued this by institutionalizing and expanding in ways keeping with his strong personal views about the importance of personal responsibility and the dangers of dependency. I want to tell you a joke that I used to tell. I can't tell it anymore because of Jason, because of Robert. I used to tell it a long time ago, and the joke goes something like this. I was warned not to tell it, but I'm going to tell it anyway. There's a new little boutique up on the Upper East Side, and they have on the shelves the brains of various dead people. So I walk in, I was kind of curious, and I look and I see one of the brain of Dwight D. Eisenhower, and that was $250. Seemed pretty good. Then I see the brain of Frank Sinatra, and that's $1,000. And then I see the brain of the former commissioner of welfare for the city of New York, and that's $250,000. And so I go and I say to the owner, how is this that it's so little money for these famous people and kind of an obscure public official, it's $250,000? And he said, oh, Mr. Cove, you don't understand. That one was never used. There is a little question that Charles Murray's Manhattan Institute-sponsored book, Losing Ground, paved the intellectual way for the massive changes in welfare policy experienced in New York City. But it took many years for the rest of the country to follow suit, and never at the level of New York City. The environment created by Robert and the administration for providers like America Works is without equal throughout the country. Their policies and their professional staff have made our task of getting welfare recipients jobs and making them self-sufficient easier than in any of the other 8 cities around the country that we work. Robert Doar joined the Bloomberg administration in 2007, having gained national recognition for his work at the state, eventually becoming commissioner under Governor Pataki of OTDA. Robert has spent almost 20 years helping to implement welfare policies with a level of integrity seen really in our public officials. And I use that word integrity purposefully and with great admiration. For those of you who know the family he comes from, it is clear that the moral character imbued by them allowed Robert to artfully craft his passion for reducing dependence and honorably helping people leave welfare for independence. Robert was at the state in 1995, a year before welfare reform got its start. At that time, there was nationwide excitement and support for welfare reform. He was instrumental in leading the state of New York's efforts. As with any great innovation, the interest of the politicians and the press and the public wanes over time. Around the nation, welfare reform was scaled back. States such as California dropped any effort of participation in employment mandates. The difference in New York City was amazing. Through Commissioner Doar's leadership and against the opposition of the advocates, he remained true to the intent of the law. The results, even in the latest Great Recession, have been that while welfare rolls rose throughout the nation, New York City saw only a slight increase. Those on the left believe they have a corner on caring for the poor. In fact, their policies have done more harm than good. Robert is a Republican, as is his father, John Doar. John, who is over here, who I think we should all also give it. John was a civil rights lawyer, the John Doar. He helped write and pass both civil rights and voting rights acts. These two men have done more to help the poor than those on the left. What Robert shares with the Manhattan Institute is a belief that we can and we should seek real and meaningful solutions to social problems. Not left or right, liberal or conservative, but strategic and sustainable. As for his accomplishments, I want to focus on 3 that we at America Works are passionate about. Work first. Many in the welfare industrial complex recoil as if work was a 4-letter word. They have always favored education and training, although studies show time and again it does not work to get people off of public support. Robert has fought continuously with the welfare advocates to maintain jobs as the first strike in reducing dependence. Performance-based contracting. Until this was implemented, programs were paid for their expenses, not their outcomes. New York City was one of the first to only pay providers of welfare-to-work services if they got someone a job and if they stayed in a job. Obvious? Right. But you have no idea how even now the provider community and many politicians fight to go back to the old ways. Robert has stood his ground, and because of this, has some of the most successful and efficient welfare-to-work providers in the country. Child support. Many of you are familiar with Manhattan Institute's Kay Heimewitz's work, Kay is here today, demonstrating the deleterious effects of fatherlessness. I, among others, believe this is the taproot of much social dysfunction. Under Commissioner Doar, HRA has increased ways for the fathers to become more involved in their children's lives, both financially and emotionally. This has been accomplished by stricter child support enforcement, along with expanding job opportunities for non-custodial fathers. Before ending, I want to mention that Robert is an innovator, testing pilot programs which may have huge impact on public policy. Here is but one example. He has started a program that has helped homeless from living in shelters for years by providing jobs and housing and diverting them from the shelters. Coming up to this podium is an exemplar of the honorable public servant, one with integrity, compassion, creativity, and the skills to deliver to those less fortunate opportunity, pride, and independence. It is my great privilege to give you Commissioner Robert Doar.
Thank you, Peter. I want to especially thank you for your joke because you've provided the humor for our speech today, and I especially liked your reference to my position as a relatively obscure public official. You're correct about that. And thank you also to the Manhattan Institute, not only for this honor, but also for all that you have done for our city. The list of important thinkers and writers at the Institute who have positively influenced public policy in New York is long. So long that I hesitate to mention any, except perhaps Heather McDonald or Kay Heimowitz and Howard Husick and E.J. McMahon and Myron Magnant, Larry Mohn and Nicole Gelinas. I said the list was long. I have known the Manhattan Institute and the City Journal a long time and have greatly benefited from your insights and contributions. I also want to say how grateful I am to Mayor Bloomberg. At no time in these past 6 years have I ever doubted that Mayor Bloomberg supported work-based welfare policies and that he wanted me to stand strong in defense of policies that have reduced our welfare caseload by more than 700,000 recipients, increased work rates for single mothers, and reduced poverty. And I want to credit and thank Deputy Mayor Linda Gibbs for her steadfast support for my work in maintaining these accomplishments, while at the same time always pushing me and everyone in city government to do still more to raise the economic prospects of low-income New Yorkers. Finally, I need to let you know that I represent a large 14,000-person city agency. And one of the remarkable and underappreciated aspects of welfare reform in New York City is the extent to which our employees have accepted and endorsed and acted on the personal responsibility emphasis and work focus of welfare reform. It is a little-known fact that the best place and the quickest way to find an ardent welfare reformer is on the front lines of our city's welfare agency. We could not have accomplished all that we have without our workforce accepting and acting on the challenge. Now, I hope you don't mind if I begin today with a little bit about how I got into this welfare reform business in the first place. I was very lucky to be asked to join the Pataki administration in the fall of 1995. I had previously worked on a congressional campaign for the Washington Monthly and even ran for state assembly myself. And at every stop, I had advocated for policies that would reform welfare and ask for personal responsibility from recipients and emphasize work and family as the path out of poverty, not government assistance, not welfare rights or entitlements. My first exposure to being able to really do anything about these concerns came when Governor Pataki asked me to be the director of the state Child Support Enforcement Program. And to tell you the truth, when I was asked by friends how I got the job, I used to reply, well, it turns out that when Republicans are in charge, the line for jobs in social services is very short. Created by a federal statute during the Ford administration, the nation's child support enforcement program was supposed to do something about absent fathers of children on welfare. It was supposed to make deadbeat dads pay for the care of their children, care that the state was providing through the old welfare program. A lofty and, given the circumstances, large goal. But at least in New York, child support enforcement was a backwater, the bastard child of social services, one county official told me. Its goal of enforcing parents' personal responsibility to provide financial support for his children had been out of step with the prevailing themes of the Mario Cuomo administrations. Its methods of using law enforcement techniques to track down absent fathers were an embarrassment to traditional social workers. The state was only in the business at all because it was a federal requirement that came with a generous federal funding. Needless to say, in the first year of the Pataki administration, it was a great place to work. There is nothing like being given a job where the only path is up. So I was lucky, and I was also fortunate to have the total support of Governor Pataki. As I've said, child support enforcement was a great personal responsibility issue, which the governor cared about a lot. And even better, perhaps, it was also a great women's issue. The custodial parent we were trying to help was almost always the mother, and while the political push for greater child support collections rarely came from the traditional poverty-fighting advocacy groups, they were quite happy with the government taking over the care of children. There was a real grassroots, lower middle-class group of women who were not receiving welfare, but who had been frustrated and abused by the traditional court processes for divorce and support. These women were demanding that we do a better job for them, as well as for the women on welfare. But my purpose today is not to talk about child support enforcement. I promise I'm going to get to welfare reform in a minute. But all I will say further is that we shamelessly stole from other states' innovations. We promoted the personal responsibility message of the program, and collections rose dramatically to more than $1.5 billion collected statewide in 2006. So I was again lucky to be working in social services when, even before the passage of the Federal Welfare Reform Act, Mayor Giuliani began to bring work requirements, any fraud measures, and personal responsibility requirements and expectations to welfare policy here in New York City. Now, Governor Pataki and Mayor Giuliani may have had their disagreements, but as the person responsible for communicating the state's positions to city officials, I never saw it. In fact, to us in the state oversight agency, the message from the governor's office was always clear: make sure you help the mayor reform welfare. Now, there are 5 key elements to welfare reform in New York City. They were essential in the early years, and they have remained essential during the Bloomberg administration. Let's take them one at a time. Work first over education and training. Offering adult welfare recipients education and training may sound nice, but study after study has shown that it doesn't work. The key has been to require 100% engagement in work or work-like activities. Enforce consequences for failing to comply. In order to receive the government's cash assistance, welfare applicants or recipients have got to show up and show us that they're actively engaged in work or getting to work, and we will vigorously monitor that they are doing this. Strong anti-fraud measures. Welfare programs cannot be naive about the capacity of citizens to deceive or try to get over on the system. We are not afraid to check assets and income and residency and identity to be sure taxpayer-funded benefits are going to those who legitimately qualify. And performance-based contracts. We pay our not-for-profit and private sector vendors for accomplishments, not just for seeing a client. HRA was one of the first social service agencies to use 100% performance-based contracts to provide employment services to welfare recipients, and we continue to do so today. Now, there is another element of our success that I want to give additional attention to this afternoon. We strongly endorsed work supports to shore up wages for low-income families. Let me repeat. A key to the success of welfare reform in New York City were the significant investments in income or work supports for working families. These are the aspects of help that NYU professor Larry Mead is talking about when he always refers to welfare reform as being a combination of hassle and help. Now, what are these supports for working families? Well, one is child support enforcement. In 1997, that program collected $300 million in New York City for New York City families, many of whom were formerly on welfare. In 2012, we collected more than $739 million. Another is public health insurance, or Medicaid. Now, I have great concerns about the way the state manages the Medicaid program, how healthcare providers are monitored and costs controlled. But Governor Pataki and Mayors Giuliani and Bloomberg have all been clear that the problem in Medicaid is not that we enroll too many people. Governor Pataki expanded health insurance, public health insurance. Mayor Giuliani made providing health insurance something of a personal crusade. And Mayor Bloomberg has made it clear that it is better to have people insured than not. And the result of this promotion of public health insurance, of the effort to make it reach as many New Yorkers as possible, is that more than 95% of New York City's children have either public or private health insurance. Our uninsured rate for children is less than 5%, virtually universal coverage. The best it has ever been, and better than any large city in the United States. The Earned Income Tax Credit is another important support for working people. We have the most generous EITC in the country because here in New York City we add a state credit and a city credit to the mix. This tax credit is a classic transfer program that provides far more than the amount needed to refund payroll taxes, and it's expensive. But probably most important, the Earned Income Tax Credit helps keep low-skilled New Yorkers working and off cash welfare. Then there are food stamp benefits. Here the level of support has been more uneven and ambivalent. One of the differences between the Bloomberg administration and its predecessor is that Mayor Bloomberg, so long as we can expect that recipients work and there are adequate fraud prevention, such as finger imaging, believes that food stamp benefits are another important component of our efforts to increase the economic strength of low-income working families. Pushed by federal and state policies which we are required to implement, and by our own desire to make the application process simpler for recipients and our workers, the program has grown dramatically, from 789,000 recipients in 2002 to more than 1.8 million New Yorkers on food stamps in 2012. So what we have now is not an entitlement-based welfare system, but a work-based welfare system. If you are able-bodied and you can work, you must, as a condition of receiving assistance, and if you do, we will make your earnings from work go farther. If there is an aspect of our work support system that makes me uncomfortable, it is the diminished goal of self-sufficiency. In the early years of welfare reform, messages were important. We emphasized personal responsibility, self-sufficiency, and time-limited assistance. We spoke against government dependence. The focus was on the efforts of the individual, not the government. But in our drive to provide and promote work supports, I worry that we have lost that message and we need it back. We found in welfare reform that messaging matters, and we need clear messages from all of our leaders that while the government can and should provide supports, the responsibility for one's economic success and prosperity lies with the individual and the family. With President Obama's second inaugural address coming up soon, it would be a good time for him to remind the country that our government is dependent on the people, not the other way around. We also need more clarity and discussion from all leaders about the importance of family. Despite the widespread acceptance that children do better in two-parent married households, despite what we know about the instability and financial hardships caused by single parenting, single parents trying to raise children on their own, and despite statistics about worse educational attainment, greater criminal justice involvement, and greater welfare usage among single-parent families, despite all of this, our leaders, our universities, our media, our religious institutions, and the leaders of the groups where the problem of single parenthood is most severe, both the African American and Hispanic communities, refuse to take this issue on aggressively or deal with it in any meaningful way. This problem is particularly glaring in the reporting of most of our media, which, to its sometimes credit, devotes great effort to chronicling in remarkable detail the difficulties of the poor, but can't seem to ask the subjects of their stories a simple question: where's the father? And then there is the president. There could be no better voice on the important issue of family and the role and the role fathers play in the lives of children than the President of the United States. With the First Lady, he sets the absolutely correct example, and examples help. But he says so little, and he almost never turns his hypercritical eye on this important issue. He is very good at describing America's shortcomings and hypocrisies and failures, but not this one. The most eloquent expression of the role of a married father during the most recent presidential campaign came from the First Lady during her Democratic National Convention speech. Michelle Obama described her disabled father rising every morning to head off to work. She recounted how she and her brother fulfilled their father's dreams by going to college, for which her father proudly helped to pay. You see, said the First Lady, for my dad, that's what it meant to be a man. It won't happen. It surely won't happen. But it would be nice if President Obama used his second inaugural address to reframe President Kennedy's call to ask not what your country can do for you, not to herald a new age of public service, but to remind Americans that strong individuals and families are still the essential prerequisite to a successful America. Now, I began this afternoon by thanking various leaders and government agents for their help in changing welfare as we knew it. Before I end, I need to say that the biggest key to success of all was the recipients themselves. We in government, in press releases and promotional material, like to say that we placed people in jobs or got jobs for this number of people. But anyone who actually does that work knows that the person who gets the job is the person who gets the job. And that act, thousands and thousands of times every year, by former or prospective or current welfare recipients of getting a job and earning a wage, is what made welfare reform a success and proved that poor New Yorkers, even poor single mothers, could and would choose responsibility and greater independence if only they were asked. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Doar. If I might start the questions, I'm really struck by your comments about the decline in emphasis on self-sufficiency and how complicated that is, because you want to support work, but at the same time there's a potential downside to that. I was wondering if you feel that that implies the likelihood of an increased kind of paternalism that's going to emerge. Here's what I'm talking about. One of the most interesting things that you tried to do was to limit the use of food stamps for sugared drinks. And Washington actually wouldn't let you do that.
They said no.
Right. I know that Mayor Bloomberg definitely wants you to do that.
Yes.
But I want to ask you, do you think that that's the future? That is, if we're going to be supporting people through the earned income tax credit and all those other work supports that you mentioned, is it inevitable that we're also going to be seeking to influence their behavior, and is that a good thing?
Well, I think the analogy to the food stamp issue that we pursued with the Obama administration, where we asked him to test an experimental project where we limited the use of the food stamp benefits for products that were clearly unhealthy and contributed to the obesity problem and contributed to higher health care costs, was really more about health care and more about a health problem than about a sort of concerted and premeditated desire to influence people's behavior, honestly. The mayor is very devoted to and very, very committed to policies that improve the health outcomes for families and people in the city of New York. This was something he absolutely believed in and fought hard for. Unfortunately, the President and the Secretary of Agriculture said no, it wasn't something that they wanted to test or even experiment with and see how it would work. But I don't know that at least from the Bloomberg administration, that carries forward to many, many other places or ways. We definitely want to encourage work. We think work is a key part of an individual's life and livelihood in the city, and it ought to be a prerequisite to receiving public assistance. And we wanted to take a program, the food stamp program is now called the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. Supplemental Nutrition Assistance. And the use of the food stamp benefit to purchase products that are clearly unhealthy seemed to us just like, why don't we try limiting that and sending a message to recipients that they should buy products that are more appropriate for their health. So I don't know that that carries forward. I do think that it is a lot about messaging. I think the with regard to the messages about self-sufficiency and dependency, you know, it's a different political world we're in. I mean, we have a Democratic governor and a Democratic president, and they're more interested in government-sponsored solutions and less interested in talking about independence and self-sufficiency. So I think that's part of the problem. So there's my answer on that.
Good. Let me open it up to questions from the floor now. Larry Mead, who's been referenced positively a couple times today,
Yeah.
is here with us today. Larry Mead from NYU. Wait, yeah. The rules are with the microphone. Tell us who you are. I already told you who he is.
Yeah, Larry Mead from NYU. Robert, I want to pick up on your comment about the marriage problem, the family problem. I think since we made some progress in raising work levels among people on welfare, in a sense that shifts the priority towards addressing the problem of family breakdown, family non-marriage, and so on. And I agree with you that this is a very sensitive issue that people find really hard time addressing and attacking. And from your comments, I had a sense that maybe you think that the best way we can promote marriage is actually just to stop accepting non-marriage. That is, we really have to say it's improper to have children outside marriage. This really isn't a good idea. And we have to go back to a policy where we actively disapprove of this. Now, we know from various opinion surveys that the public is uneasy about that. They don't want to stigmatize single mothers. At the same time, they don't want to see the decline of the family. So what's the answer here? Is it rhetoric? Is it public campaign? Which is, I think, what you're suggesting, and I kind of lean that way myself. Or is there some practical thing we can do at a policy level that will actually promote the family?
Well, as someone in the practical world of policy and public agency work, I've struggled with this immensely because it is very hard to pull a string or a policy objective to promote marriage greater than single parenthood, which is what we really need. So what we all sort of default to, honestly, is public relations campaigns and promotion and sending the messages. That's all we have left. And what I was trying to say today was we're not even trying to talk about that enough. And there is just this great discomfort. So I think it was pretty clear that's the only answer I have on that issue. We know lots of single parents do very well and are able to raise children, and we certainly don't want to, I think it would be going too far to deny assistance or to turn our backs on them. But clearly it is a part of, a significant part of the problem.
Yes, Jason Turner.
Oh. They're all coming from the head table.
As somebody who admires your work, Robert, knowing how challenging it is having had that job before, here's my question. I think you're the first commissioner that's served 3 consecutive mayoralty terms. It's very difficult to serve 1 term without getting fired.
Well, wait a minute, Jason. I've not worked for Mayor Bloomberg for 11 years, and I just want to make that clear about that.
It just felt that way.
It's felt
all
that
right,
way.
all right. 3 Bloomberg terms of which you served in the majority. Yeah. What's your key to success?
Well, what I used to say that when I worked for Governor Pataki right to the last day, to December 2006, and I remember when we left the office, I had my then 9-year-old or 8-year-old son, and he insisted on leaving these notes on the chair to the next occupant, and they were, I picked them up, and the first one said, "Boo, Elliot Spitzer," and I said, Mike, Bobby, I don't know if that's the right message. And I'm sorry, Governor Spitzer, but and then what happened was that Mayor Bloomberg kind of picked me up on waivers. You know, the current commissioner was going to leave, and he saw I had worked with the city so aggressively and so much, and I think I had been supportive. He offered me the job. the key to staying successful or appearing successful in city government is to, first of all, focus on your employees. Focus on the people that are in your team. Be a good internal leader first, because I talked about the importance of HR employees in the speech, but good public managers have to keep their team together and on board. And when you watch commissioners that fail in any administration, you'll often, if you pull the string, you'll often find that some of it came from their own internal management problems, not necessarily what they said publicly. Secondly, I always felt that in the city of New York, I remember I wrote this once on an application for the job, that a key to being a good welfare commissioner in New York City was to not worrying about what the New York Times said, ever. And that's the mayor likes that, and I'm comfortable with that, and so that's worked. And then the other has to do with the obscure issue. I'm not a big self-promoter. We just want to do the job and focus on the outcomes and the numbers. And sometimes that's been successful, and we've got some numbers that we want to work on. But we've been honest about it, and we've talked about it. We've returned every city councilman's phone call within a couple days. We go to and testify before the city council. We take the battering, and we just keep at it. I think it's, there's a year to go. In the Bloomberg administration, we're all very fond of saying there's 352 days left or 356 days left. Maybe people are counting. And third terms are tough. But my view is that at this point, let's see it through to the end.
Michael Myers.
Thank you. Michael Myers, Executive Director of the New York Civil Rights Coalition. I wonder, Commissioner, if you would comment with respect to the change in progress in welfare reform policy from the no man in the home rule, where fathers who were known did not come into the home because the mother and the children needed financial assistance,
Right.
to now your current policy is encouraging fathers and parents. But with respect to the change in social values, no more is it father in the home. It's now, and family is redefined.
Right.
So you can't have a situation where you're preferring fathers and defining parenting and family with respect to father being at the head of the household. Secondly, I wanted you to talk about the work requirement in the context of massive unemployment and the movement for prevailing wages.
I'll do both of those. The first, I'm really glad you raised the issue about the father and the household, because the other way that we sort of try to tackle the single-parent family issue is that we concede a little bit on marriage and say, well, let's work with the dad, with employment programs, with programs that make the child support enforcement program a little more forgiving and understanding so that we bring them into the system. We fund parenting programs. So the idea is that we can get better outcomes for children, not married families versus non-married families, but married families versus non-married families with active and financially contributing parents, married or not. And then there's those where their father's not involved at all. That's our hope, because we know we're going to continue to be frustrated against the cultural forces relating to marriage and childbearing. So what we are trying to do, and the mayor has started the NYC Dads Initiative. We have a father's coordinator, Alan Farrell at City Hall, who's focusing on this issue, is we're trying to kind of taking the compromise position. Well, if we can't get them married, we can't establish married households, let's at least get both parents involved and contributing. And that's what we're trying. And there's a lot of people, including myself, who have hope for that. Larry Mead has talked about this as well. But the results aren't in yet. We don't know yet whether that's working. We do know that if a parent is supporting them financially, they're more likely to be active. And we do know that households that have child support collections do better because both parents are contributing. So we are going at that. With regard to the unemployment issue, we have greatly benefited in New York City because even during the recession, this enormous array of opportunities for unskilled or low-skilled New Yorkers has remained in place. We have a vibrant tourist industry. We have a vibrant retail industry. We have opportunities. And it's never been very hard, even during the recession, for us to find people jobs in New York City. Now, I don't know whether that's true around the country, but that has been key. And I have to say that when it comes to the wages, you know, we're at, I guess the governor proposed to go to $8.75. Not very many people leave welfare for, or we place people or help people get jobs for less than $8.75. I should let you know. New York City wages are generally higher than that. So while I'm, you know, as a sort of economic theorist, minimum wage legislation makes me a little nervous, I don't think the practical effect will be as severe as it might be thought of. Maybe for teenagers, I think of farm workers or workers upstate where wages are even lower as a problem. But in the city of New York, I'm comfortable that we can adjust around it. The problem, the issue that one who is worried about work supports has to ask themselves is, are our work supports in some way not just good for the employee, but also good for the employer? Are we allowing employers to be able to have workers they might not ordinarily have, that add value to their business, and allow them to compete in an international market or against other ways people can use their money and make their business more vibrant or competitive to businesses where wages are lower? And I think there's some truth to that. I believe that. So I've always thought that particularly public health insurance. Now, what Obamacare is going to do is a whole other question. And I'm not sure what's going to happen then when mandates and requirements and employers begin to realize that they face penalties if they don't have enough workers or if they have too many workers working for too many hours and they're not providing them health insurance. That's a wild card. The one other thing I want to mention, and it wasn't asked, but I do want to mention one thing. When people worry about the costs of these new work supports, they really need to divide them between health care related costs, health insurance related costs, and the rest. In New York City, we'll spend about $35 billion on Medicaid. Food stamps is 3. Cash welfare is less than 1. The child care credits are, you know, hundreds of millions. So I do worry that those who are concerned about overabundance of work supports may lose focus on the real problem in our government's spending, which is health care, retirees, entitlement benefits, and think that, well, we'll solve that deficit problem if we just turn those work supports back. It won't work. You won't get the money, and I don't think you'll be doing the right thing. So it's very important to remember that while I work for government and I sponsor and support spending in government for people who are poor, I'm also conscious of the fact that we've made commitments in our country that are beyond what we can afford. But those commitments are not related, except for the case of Medicaid, to these programs. They're not related to the Earned Income Tax Credit or to even food stamp benefits.
John. Wait.
That table again.
Here's a man who knows how to wait for the mic.
Yes.
When you say you testify or your people testify before the city council and you get battered, what do they complain about?
You see here good laughs over here from the members of my staff. Well, the political environment in New York City is different than it is in other parts of the country, I'm sure. It's certainly different than it was in Albany, although it's not that much different. There is a strong perception that among folks that I testify with is that we should not ask anything. We should not require anything. We shouldn't require documentation. We shouldn't expect anybody to do anything. We should just provide struggling people with a minimum level of support and then be done with it. And that didn't work. It doesn't work. And the mayor doesn't support that. So often that's what the push and pull is about. Why didn't you give that benefit to these people as fast as possible? And why are you asking them to be finger imaged to make sure that we check their identity and don't abuse our system by having people take advantage of us? It's always about increasing the transfer of money from government to the populations that they represent. That's what it's always about.
Good. Yes, Michael, in the middle. Changing tables here, Rob.
That's good.
Hi. Michael Goodman from the New York Post. Commissioner, I'd like to get you to go back to the issue of out-of-wedlock births. As I recall statistics, there are roughly 50,000 children born each year in New York City out of wedlock. So in Mayor Bloomberg's roughly 10 years, 500,000 kids now born out of wedlock. And if we were to see this as a public health crisis, in terms whether it's obesity or crime or poor educational outcomes, why couldn't it be attacked or approached in the same way as obesity, with public service announcements about the value of marriage and the horrors of out-of-wedlock birth? So I'd ask you to sort of be creative about this. If you could design a public service campaign to encourage marriage, and you had the unlimited money of, say, a Mayor Bloomberg, how would you do it? What would it say?
Well, we are talking about doing that actually at HRA, and the thing that we think is the most, it's a very tricky issue, and lots of people, it's not the same level of consensus as it is with a public health campaign like anti-obesity or anti-smoking. But what we think is a way of approaching it is through the perspective of the outcome for the child. That whenever I'm in the sort of front lines of welfare policy and I meet with recipients or young people who talk about these issues, I always worry that they get the sense or they have the belief that somehow or another the government will resolve or overcome for them, and they will be able to resolve or overcome the problem of the fact that there isn't a second parent in the household for their child. That it'll work out, or you'll take care of me, or something will work out. And the statistics are so clear that we think the better way to do it is to try to turn the conversation not about the mom and the dad, but about the potential outcomes for the children, and try to get young people and people who are considering having children before they're prepared to consider the likelihood that their child will do well in school or succeed economically. That's one way. Now, that's something that we're working with, we're talking about, we're trying to think it through, but that's the way we're working it through in the government. And I have to say, it's not resolved, because we will have to talk to a lot of people in test groups and our own sister agencies and see if we can resolve the discomfort even that will cause for people that just don't like talking about this issue.
And only 350 days to go.
Yeah.
But one last question.
The guy, yeah. Well, he's had his hand up the whole time. Howard. All right, well, maybe. Go ahead.
Okay, Ed Thompson, Ayn Rand Institute. The discussion so far pertains to out-of-wedlock single parent families. But it all begins before that. There's having children out of wedlock in the first place. So, and that goes back basically, I would say, to high school level. So wouldn't there a program in high school teaching responsibility, parental guidance, I don't know, however you want to label it, but you see where I'm going with this.
Yeah. And we do that.
That might not be on your, well, okay.
It is done. I mean, the Department of Health and I remember when I worked at the state, we produced a curriculum for the responsibilities of young high school boys, that they need to be aware of what the Child Support Enforcement Program was about, and that their responsibilities for their children, should they have them, would go for 21 years. We've spread that curriculum about. The schools talk about this, and then there's, of course, contraceptive. And so we do that too. And to be fair, the teen birth rate is down dramatically from where it used to be. It's down in the city, it's down around the country, it's gone down. And teen pregnancy rates are down. So we're making progress on that. The 50,000 number that Michael mentioned could be much higher. But I just think that we need to do even more.
I'd follow up briefly on that. If you're telling children that the given is, we have this program for when you have babies, you're telling them to have baby. Okay, now you see where I'm going.
Yeah.
What about a program that says,
don't have babies out of wedlock,
Well-
wait, get married, and so forth.
Well, no, but no. I listen. The self-sufficiency message that I mentioned, that we don't emphasize quite as much as we used to, had an effect on decision making and the welfare policies I've talked about, because people and the studies have shown that strong child support enforcement programs reduce non-marital births and teen pregnancy. So if you're sending a message that we're not going to make life easy and simple for you just because you have a child, that does have an effect, and I think has broadly in welfare policy around the country. That's why we have stuck with our work requirements, and we set up work requirements involving single moms with very young children, and we don't give in on that, even here in New York City. And that, I think, has had an impact. There isn't any question about that. It's just we wish it was more.
Please join me in congratulating our 2012 Urban Innovator, Commissioner Robert Doar.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I think it is clear how fortunate we are to believe in the power of ideas.
Supply the common sense and the fresh thinking of the Manhattan Institute.